Hey, this is going to be a recap of The Haunting of Hill House, Season 1, Episode 7, Eulogy. So, it opens with the father. He's at the police station, voluntarily at this point. And the officer, he starts off being really nice, you know how they do. So he came in and brought him a cup of coffee, and he said, "Did you say sugar or cream?" And he said, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, damn, I forgot to get it. I'll just go and take care of it." And so he was like, the father was like, "Oh, no." So he said, no, it's no problem at all. Because, you know, it's going to take some time. You know, we're going to need to go over your statement again. About your wife, about the house, about the other body. And he's like, we had nothing to do with that. And I'm like, what other body? What? Who? So, so the officer was like, you know, and if you leave and get a lawyer, then it's good, you know, we're not going to be able to get to the bottom of this. And basically, he's very firm and adamant. He was like, "I did tell you that you were here voluntarily and you could leave anytime you want, right? But I think it would be for you to stay and we can go over your statement again. But let me go and get that coffee for you," right? So, we move forward to Dad. He's in this hotel room and he's getting ready, and he's still talking to somebody, and so he's changing ties, trying to figure out which tie he's going to use, wear, and he's somebody is guy telling him, "Oh, that is like a wife would, like, no, not that tie, this tie, whatever." So he finally gets himself together, and he heads over to heads over to Shirley's house for the funeral. And we flash back to the house, and they're walking around now doing an assessment. Him and Mr. Dudley is going around doing an assessment of the damage after the storm. And Mr. Dudley was like, then the father was like, "Well, you only live like 10 minutes or so away, but your house," he said, "No, we only got some rain." And he was telling him about some kind of storm that's really localized but does a lot of damage. And he wondered if that's what that was, because it was just so much damage to the house. And so Steve walks in and he's touching some wall, and he was like, "Dad, this wall is squishy or something," he said. And so the father pushes the wall, and sure enough. And so now they're concerned about water damage. So they're going through the house and they're marking all the walls that could potentially be that has been affected by this rain. They're like, "Wait a minute, this is way too much damage for it just to be a storm from last night." And so they followed all the way down to the basement, and sure enough, it got all the way down there. And he put a hole in, punched a hole in the wall so they could see if there were any. They could smell mold when they walked down there. And he's like, "Oh, how could they make it all the way down here? It was just only last night. How could this happen all overnight?" And so now the father is sitting there because he's concerned because the damage could be so severe. He's like, "This could ruin us. Like, this is." He just, at this point, he's just standing there trying to figure out what the hell he's going to do, because it's a lot of damage. So we flash back, and the father, he's standing in the kitchen talking to his grandchildren, and so it's like, "Well, how come we never? You're our grandfather." He said, "Why could we never met you?" And so he was like, "Well, I did meet the son, who's a little bit older than the daughter." And he said, "I don't remember that." And he said, "Because you were but you were still very young." And you have Shirley, she's on the phone talking to the florist about these particular flowers and how it doesn't seem like they're going to have the flowers that they want in the quantity and the whole thing. So then you see Kevin walk in, looking exhausted, looking all disheveled. And so Shirley was like, "Well, Kevin will come over and pick up the flowers." And he's leaving now. And so he gets off the phone. Sarah gets off the phone with the florist, and he was like, "Well, I have to go. I have to get a shower and get ready for the funeral." And he was like, "Okay." So she wasn't really trying to talk to him at that point. And so he leaves to go get the flowers. And the dad was like, he only took that money because, you guys needed it. And basically, like, don't be too hard on him, because, he did it for a good reason. Yes, you've had very strong feelings about it, but at the same time, he didn't say this, I'm saying this, but had it not been for your actions and you not listening to him when he was telling you that you guys are having financial issues and you can't just keep giving all these discounts, it's almost he was backed into a corner. But at this point, she can't see that right now. She's still pissed. And so she was like, "You know what? It's 8:30. We open at 10. We're not open yet." So he ends up moving on, moseying on over to Theo. And Theo looks like shit. She was drunk, and then the whole situation with Kevin in the storeroom, stockroom, whatever that was. So she lets him in, and they talk. Her dad talk, and she basically said, "You know what, Dad, I fucked up." And so he looks at her like, and she said, "You know what? I am sorry. I know that you tried as best you could, and I could have met you halfway. I could have reached out more, and we all fuck up." And it's not until, everybody fucks up, but we don't realize that until we fuck up. And I really fucked up. And and he said, "This is not about Kevin and the money, is it?" She was like, "No." So now he's getting the gist of it, because he did say to Shirley before she threw him out, like, I saw him at the hotel. So when she threw his ass out, he wouldn't stay up at the hotel where Dad was staying. He said, "I saw him getting the free breakfast." So he's putting two and two together, and I was like, oh shit. So yeah, so she basically like, I need to get ready, and he thought that she was going to ask him to leave, but she was like, "No, you stay, and you enjoy and finish your coffee. It's it's fine. Just stay and rest yourself." So okay, so we see who Dad is talking to, or think he's talking to. We don't know yet. So Theo goes to take a shower, and you look over, and the mother is sitting there, where Theo was sitting across from the table. And she said simply to him to that effect, but she was like, "But you could fix it. You always fix things." And so you flash back to the house where they're going over the blueprints and the damages. So he's telling her everything that's going on. And she's like, "I don't understand how we can have that much water damage, and the blueprints are a mess." She's like, "This house is schizophrenic. We don't even have, basically they don't have a clear understanding of how this house was designed." And they got a guy in to come in to assess the damage and the mold. And he was talking about, how, like, if you ever lived in an apartment and the apartment has been flooded, they'll bring in these like industrial sized fans to dry up everything, drop all the water, and put something down to kill the mold. And so he's basically saying that's what they are going to have to do throughout the house. And he's saying that we don't understand where this water, you have a ton of water, but no clear source of where it's coming from. And he mentioned the room that they don't have a key to. And he said, well, that could be the culprit. And so he basically told the man, like, we are, our budget is what it is. And is there any way how much could you quote me for a rental? And so he set on him and Steve going through to do the work at this point. And so now we flash back, and now, people are arriving at the funeral. He finally arrived, Dad. And far off, you see Steve and Leigh. They're talking. Obviously, it wasn't a happy conversation, because she got up and stormed off and went and get her some coffee. So he walks over to Leigh and asked her how she was doing, if everything was okay. She was like, "Oh, how you hold it up," gave him a hug, and she walked on the way. And then he saw Luke sitting on the chair, and he went and talked to him. He sat down and talked to him, asked him how he was doing, and told him how proud he was of him for his 90 days. And then the mom was like, well, he doesn't want to make today about him. You don't have to say anything. You could just sit. You don't have to talk and say anything. And so he didn't say anything. And then Luke said, he said, there's a lot of people here. And the dad was like, well, yeah, a lot of people loved her. And so then Theo walks in, because she's trying to keep her head down. So she walks over to the little chair where the dad and Luke is sitting. And he told her beer and tomatoes. And she's like, excuse me? Like, beer and tomatoes is one of the best things for a hangover. And she was like, and that works? And he was like, not as much to hit a smack. She was like, wait a minute. Heroin isn't as a remedy for a hangover? He said, bar none. Like, it's one of the best things you could do, right? But he is a junkie, so. Anywho's. So while they're talking, old girl walks in. The Asian girl that she thought she was just going to have a one-night stand with, that keeps, popping up. And I'm like, she kind of crazy. She weird. And I'm not sure what's her game. Because she walks over, Theo see her walk in, and she's like, what the hell? So she walks over there like, what are you doing here? And she was like, oh, well, I saw the obit. I saw the obituary, and I thought you may need some support. And I'm like, girl, you are not in a relationship. What? How you just show up at somebody's funeral? Regardless of if you're screwing the person, she was like, Theo basically, if I wanted you here, I would have invited you. Theo can be very curt and nasty, but I'm thinking, where this is concerned, I'm like, girl, that's weird. And so, but she was like, you know what, I am sorry. And so Theo was like, you know what, fuck me, just fuck my day, right? So she storms off, I guess presumably get a drink. And over, she walks on in and takes the one of the chairs, and she goes to have a seat. And then Janet walks in, and you know, she was very sympathetic. You could tell they ain't seen each other in a while. But I mean, there's not a whole lot you can say. She was just very sympathetic and very obviously hurt, and like, you know, none of us should be here today. Like saying this should have never happened. So more, you know, more of the same family things that we've experienced at any funeral of of a loved one who's passed away. So okay, so Steve and Dad, they're all suited up and they're ready to start kind of seeing if they can dry up some of this water and get rid of the mold. And so Olivia, she walks in and she hands the husband the blueprint, the new blueprints that she drew up. And so she's looking at the blueprints and he's kind of confused, and he's looking back at her and but she's talking to Steve, so she doesn't know. And so she walks out and he's just like really staring at these blueprints like, what did she just give me? So they flash briefly to the funeral, and Shirley she says a poem for Nell. And then Luke stands up and he talks about the last time he saw her when she had dropped him off at rehab, and how she said that, I want you to go in there and I want you to bring my brother back. And he told this cute little, you know, sibling thing, like how he's a minute and a half older than her. And he would always use that to try to get her to do what he wanted her to do because he's technically the oldest. So that was a cute little story. But then they flash back to the house. Mr. Dudley and the dad, they're in the basement, and he's still looking at these blueprints. And so Mr. Dudley walks over and he said, did Mrs. give you that? And he said, yeah. So even Mr. Dudley is confused, like, what are we looking at? And then we find out why Mr. and Mrs. Dudley are so adamant about being out of that house before nightfall. He talks about Mr. Dudley made the comment that, I think, you know, your wife may just need some time away. He says, maybe this is not my business, but I think your wife may need some time away. And they talked a little bit. And then the day he kind of got upset, like, you know, you're right. It's not your business. And so he was basically like, you know what, so he decided to go into his story. Like, you know, my mom used to work here, and how he was actually born there. And eventually they bought the cottage where he now lives with Mrs. Dudley. His parents did. And that's where they lived. And that's where he grew up. And he said something started happening with his mom, how she would come home and then she would be scattered. And that they would find her in the woods barefoot. And he said it would sound like she would be talking to someone like really low, like a suitor or something. Like it just, like there was just something off with her. And then she passed away, and then he married his wife. And then Mrs. Dudley started working there. She started working for Mrs. Hill, the old lady. And he said it was something like his wife was, you know, she would, sometimes she would work all hours of the night. And, you know, even after she got pregnant, she would still work all these long hours. And the baby was stillborn. And he said that one day his wife was in the house and she heard a baby crying. And she tore out of the house. She ran all the way home. He said by the time she got there, her face was all cut up from the branches or whatever. And he had gone back to the house with her, and then he started hearing he heard the cries too. And he said he just knew from the cries that was his daughter, that was her first cry, what would have been her first cry had she lived. And he said from that point forward, they agreed to not be on their property or in their house after dark, before dark. And he said, you know what? It actually worked. When they started doing that, all the nightmares were gone. Because he said, my wife is not his wife, Miss Dudley, is not some like wimpy, like weakly, you know, fragile woman. He said, but whatever was going on before they started doing that brought her to her knees. He was like, he would find her cowering in the corner. Like she was just so messed up. And he said, but after they stopped staying on their property after dark, all the nightmares went away. life, you know, went back to normal. And so he was like, you know what, it may not be any of my business, but I'm just telling you that sometimes some time away could do her some good, and maybe a little prayer. And so he said that the husband was like, well, we don't really do that to like believe in it. They're not a part of any like organized religion or anything of that. But he took his point. Like, you know, I do understand. He said, so if you ever see her scattered, maybe it would do well for her to take some time away from the house. And the husband was like, you know, I get your point. So, you know, whether or not he took that advice, who knows? Okay, so he ends up taking the blueprint, I guess, to go talk to her, but she wasn't there. So he started going through some of her drawers, I guess, to look at the original prints. Not sure, and I don't know what he saw, but, you know, his facial expression said that he saw something. Okay, so we're at the funeral, and now it's after, you know, after the actual service, and now they're loading into the limos to go to the cemetery. And so she was about to get into one limo, and Kevin was in there with the kids, and she was like, no, I'll pass. And then she goes over to the limo where she sees Steve's getting in, and she looks in and she sees Theo. And she was like, you know what? I have some things I need to do. I will meet you guys there. And of course, Steve was like, well, there's more than enough room. He said, she was like, I'll just meet you there. And of course, he thinks that it's all about the book and the money and that whole thing. And so he was like, you know what, Shirley, even today, like, you can't put that shit down for a day. But of course, nobody knows at this point, you know, except maybe the dad, who's kind of put two and two together, why she's so upset. So we flash to the house, and they're still getting stuff together to get this mold. And so one of the fans wasn't working right. And so he asked Steve to go in and unplug the fan so he can take a look at it. And so while he was looking up, as the curtains or whatever, that drop cloth or whatever was blowing, he could see like the mold was in the shape of a person. It was like almost like, you know, see somebody burn, you see these sci-fi shows where people get burned, you see like their imprint of their body on the wall or on the ground or something. That's basically what it looked like, but it was mold. And so I don't know if he thought he wasn't paying attention and thought that Steve unplugged the fan, or if he did, but he ends up sticking his hand in and cutting the shit out of his hand. Like, well, you need stitches. It was bleeding so bad. And so he starts yelling at Steve, like, I told you to unplug the fan. Of course, he was like, I did unplug the fan. And he was like, you know what, no, you know, never mind. It's fine. Just go upstairs, you know, play. I'll take care of this. And he wanted to help. He was like, you helped enough. And so, it looked terrible. So he was adamant. The dad was like, you know what, I'm sick of this shit. So he goes to grab some tools to try to get into the red room, this room that's still locked. And no matter what he did, he could not pry that door open. Okay. So now we flash back to the cemetery. They're all there, and they're just in, and they're throwing like dirt on the coffin, the whole thing. So they all go ahead, and Luke is still there, and he throws the dirt on the coffin, and then he looks up, and he sees the bent neck lady. So of course he's freaking out, and then all of a sudden he starts jerking, and you look down, and then he sees his mom, who he thinks is his mom, pulling him, like, don't leave us, don't leave, da da da. And so Steve sees all this commotion going on. Of course, he can't actually see what Luke is seeing, so he just thinks that maybe Luke is tweaking or something. I don't know. He goes and snatches him up, and like, Luke was trying to tell him, I saw him, you didn't see him? He was like, no, I didn't see him. It's a sickness, and you have to fight this. This is Steve talking to Luke, and it's already taken Mom, and it's already taken Nell. I don't want to bury you too. Get your shit together. Basically, that was his whole little pep talk to Luke at the little cemetery. So he walks off, and the dad walks over and says, is everything okay? And of course, he just brushed past him, and Luke just kind of just still in shock about what he was just seeing. He walks off, and the dad stands there for a minute and just look on like, So, I mean, I'm with them. Like, at this point, I want to know what happened to the mammy. Like, what is going on here? And why is he still talking to her? Or why does he think that he's still talking to her? What's going on with this? But okay. So we flash back to the house, and it's the middle of the night, and everybody's supposed to be sound asleep. But Dad wakes up, and Mom is on top of him with the screwdriver to her throat. So he's trying to wake her up, because it looked like she was asleep. Who knows? She came to, and she's crying like she doesn't know what's going on or why she did what she did. And then he's like, you had a screwdriver to my neck. And she was like, no, I didn't. Like, I was having some kind of psychosis. Something. No. So next you know, they're looking at the blueprint, and she was like, this is the blueprint you gave me. She's like, no, it's not. He's like, this is what you drew. This is supposed to be the master blueprint that you gave me. And he said, I saw this pattern before. And then he went into her drawer, and he pulled out the blueprint she made for what she considered their dream house when she was talking to Theo about it one day. And he said, it's like you copied the same patterns over and over again. And so she started crying. And he was like, you know what? It's not a big deal. You're just tired. Maybe you just need some time away. And she was like, yeah, it's just, my migraines are a lot worse than I thought they were. And I haven't been sleeping well. And she was going to call their aunt, Janet, to see if, she can come stay with her for a few days to get out of the house. And so he said, yeah, this is not a big deal. He said, but she was like, I can't because of the kids. He was like, I'll manage here. You just take some time and, get some rest. So we flash back to the repast. And so Luke is off by himself. And Dad walks over to talk to him because he wants to talk to him about what happened at the cemetery. And he basically said he overheard the conversation and there was nothing to be embarrassed about, and how he sees his mother and he sees her all the time. And Luke was like, well, that sounds nuts. He's like, well, no, it's actually quite common in widows and widowers. They typically, it's a coping mechanism. And he was trying to let him know that, there's nothing wrong with that, but he said, but there's also those cases where sometimes it isn't. And, he basically was told him to reiterate how proud he was of him, and to just to keep up with the good work. Just he didn't want him to relapse. So Luke was like, it was nice seeing you, Dad. And he walks out to go have a smoke, and that's when Dad looks over and he sees a purse on the chair that's open. So it's like, oh shit, he done stole some damn out of his money. And so we flash back to the house where Dad, he's still trying to fight this mold situation. So he's spraying the wall with the poison, whatever that needs to kill the mold. And he hears a scratching noise again. And so he's already prepared because he has some rat poison on standby. So he hears the scratching again. He pulls a couple of bricks out. He finds a dead body. The police come. The officer it was questioning him in the beginning, he's there. And of course they're excavating the wall, pulling the wall out so they can find this dead body. And they've realized that, oh my goodness, it's William Hill. He's been missing since 1948, 47, something like that. It was obviously a really old cold case. And so the officer started asking him, is it true what they say about this house? And he's like, what? He said that it's haunted. He said, well, my kids seem to think so. And they had a few laughs, and he went on and left out. So Dad is back at the repast, and Dad is taking some medication. We don't know what the medication is for at this point. And he sees Steve. And so Steve is getting ready, getting himself together to leave. And so he walks over to talk to him. And he was like, I'm going to be at the hotel. My flight leaves early, but if you want to catch up for a drink. And, Steve was like, well, I have an early flight too. And he said, Steve, and he said, like, what? And so the mom was, telling him what he should say. He was like, I'm sorry, for not listening and not talking and not, and I regret not being there. But he basically said, have a safe flight. And they did. And so, and he said, oh, you too. And I don't know why I said they did. He said, you too. And we turn over and we see Shirley. Shirley, that was Shirley's purse. So she's like, where's my credit card? Where's my wallet? What is going on here? Da, da, da. And then the next thing you know, Theo walks in. And she's screaming at, she just said to you had my car towed? And Shirley was like, you know what? It's after hours. You can leave now. Basically, bitch, you better be out of my house. Get out of my house. She said, okay, then what happened? Where is it? So Steve was like, well, you parked it. Maybe you just forgot where you parked it. Da, da, da. And so the dad is standing like, oh, man. And so the mom is standing behind him, whispering in his ear, like, you saw him. You saw him over there by the purse. You knew what was up, but you didn't want to believe it. And then eventually, I think it was Steve that said, where's Luke? And then they started looking at each other. And the father finally said, yeah. Somebody said, have you seen, they talking to each other, like, had you seen Luke, or where's Luke? And he was like, the dad was like, yes, I saw him standing over there by the purse. And so now they know that he ripped Shirley off and took Theo's car. And yeah, that girl. So we flash back to Dad at the beginning, like he was in the police station, the officers now questioning him. And he's saying that what happened during those 3 hours between the time you found your wife's body and you called the cops? And he was like, I was grieving. He said, you didn't call the cops for 3 hours because you were grieving? He said, yeah. He said, well, what happened to your wife? You keep saying that the house killed her, and which doesn't make any sense. But then if we say she committed suicide, you get upset. But then you're saying you didn't touch her. And he's like, I didn't touch her. He said, I thought she was out of town. So we still don't know where this played in, where he thought that she had left to go with Janet, because remember the conversation earlier that she was going to call her to see if she can go visit so she could take some time away from the house. So he's saying that she was supposed to have been, I thought that she had gone to see Janet, and that's like, we called her, and he's like, I know, and she said that she didn't come. And he's like, I know that now, obviously, because I found my wife dead in the house. So it's like, we don't know if he's being honest about him not knowing that she didn't leave, or if he really did think that she had left the house and she was just somewhere. I mean, it's a huge estate, so she could have been anywhere. And so we flash back to the home, back to the funeral home. And so while they were going back and forth, about Luke stealing the money and all that kind of stuff, they went outside, and Theo and the dad was standing there, and Theo was like, what is that? And so they saw like some footprints, like some smudge marks on the carpet. And so they follow it. And they follow it. It's always all the way in Shirley's office, and they're like, and she had that. Remember in like the first or second episode where we saw she had this model house or something, and the lights were flickering. The light started flickering after she left. It was shortly after she had finished up the work, I believe, on Nell, and that house was smashed to pieces. I wonder if that was the model house that the mom, from the blueprints the mom created, what she considered to be their dream house. But it was all smashed up, and so of course they're like, oh my God, Shirley's gonna be so upset. She's gonna be so upset. And so Theo kneeled down to try to put the pieces together, and the father was like, well, that's no big deal. I can fix it. Because that's what he does. Obviously, he used to remodel homes. So he's like, I can fix it. Next thing you know, they hear some breathing, some wheezing or something, and they look up, and they see a shadow, something moving behind the desk. And now they both see it. And so now keep in mind, Theo is still kneeled down with trying to get these pieces up of this house together. And they're looking, and let you know it's her mom. She comes crawling out from behind the desk with the side of her face all screwed up. He grabs Theo and pulls her, I guess, closest to her, closer to him. And Theo starts screaming and crying, obviously, after seeing a mess like that. Shirley walks in. She sees the smashed up. She's like, what is all that noise? What's the screaming? She sees the smashed up house on the floor, on the ground. The dad is trying to tell her, it was like that when we came in here, and don't worry, I can fix it. He kept repeating, I can fix it. And so, I mean, that's basically how the episode ended. So, I'm not exactly sure why Steve is so adamant against. They've all experienced something in that house, and they've all seemed to experience something since leaving that house. So why is it, even though, he had the encounter with Nell in the kitchen, he had the encounter with Nell again when he first came to the viewing, but still he doesn't believe what he's seeing. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Like I said, I didn't read the books. So it's going to be interesting to see how this ends. This is episode 7, so hopefully soon, the next episode, we're going to find out what happened to the man, because right now, I'm like, what happened? What in the world happened? So I'm going to end this here, and I'll talk to you guys later.